Join me, David Domoney, here at Bridgemere Show Gardens as I show you how to garden step by step. I'm here in the picturesque Bridgemere Show Gardens. I can't think of a better backdrop to inspire you to garden. In this special programme, I'm going to help you with step-by-step advice on some of the essential elements of gardening. Let me show you how to grow one of my favourite fruits, apples. Painted Lady is a beautiful and historic cultivar of runner bean. I'm going to share with you my top tips on how to be successful growing this crop. And I'll be going behind the scenes, taking you inside professional plant nurseries to see exactly how they create the beautiful plants for garden centres. First of all, grafted veg. Whether you're a grower in open garden borders or compact containers, grafted plants can offer advantages that many traditional seedlings can't match. Let me explain. As a professional horticulturalist, I am always encouraged to know that professional growers are looking for new ways for people that are growing in their own garden to get a better result with the plants that they've got. One particular area which has become more and more popular and is available in garden centres but not everybody knows about is grafted plants, especially things like tomatoes and chilies and cucumbers and peppers. You can buy these plants that have been scientifically grown to be superior to others. Now, these two plants here are both tomatoes. One is grafted, one is just a standard seed tomato. Now the grafting one is taking a little bit of horticultural science. What it's doing is effectively putting the scion, which is the top part of the plant, specialised in growing the fruit, and attaching it to a dominant root system. So it's effectively not growing on its old root system, like this one is here, it's growing on roots that are significantly better, that have an ability to not only penetrate the soil, but pull in more nutrients, more water, and turbocharging the tomato to really produce heavy crops and quite a lot of them. In fact, on trials, these grafted ones can produce up to 75% more produce. If you take a look here, you can actually see the top part of the plant joined to a slightly smaller stem underneath, and this obviously will get stronger as the plant grows and more stable because you stake or wire it into position. But this root system will give phenomenal results, both in the health of the plant, the volume of the produce. The thing is, it does grow a much bigger plant. And that way you would need to give it at least 25–30% more space. And if you're putting it in a container, you want the biggest container you can, 40 litre or maybe even 50, because the bigger the space, the more water. And feeding, whilst it's still green, high nitrogen feed to help the production of leaf growth, and then switch on to a tomato food or something similar to that, which helps the plant produce its flower and of course its fruit. Always plant it in the ground, the same level it is in the pot. Never plant the union where it's joined together underneath the ground. And again, it's not just about tomatoes. You can see chilies that have been grafted onto superior roots. You see cucumbers, the same, and you've got peppers too. It's the way that science in horticulture is enhancing the way we grow in our own gardens. Give it a go. Keep an eye out for these grafted plants because the difference is phenomenal. And if you like producing your own, it's well worth making the choice. It's an amazing time of year when the bedding plants come into the garden centre. Fuchsias and beautiful bright geraniums, petunias, busy lizzies, and many more. Everybody in, buying for their baskets, their tubs and their window boxes. A considerable amount of effort goes into producing and growing the plants so they look this colourful when they're in the garden centre. Earlier on, I went to a bedding nursery to see how it's done. Here we are, unique access. I'm showing you behind the scenes of a growing nursery that grows bedding plants, very similar to the tray of bedding plants that I had in my hand at the garden centre. But as you can see here, this one's in a pot and it's just at the start of its journey, ready to fill out with roots inside the pot, lots of foliage and flower as well. Now this unique access, I'm going to try and find out some of the growing hints and tips that they utilise in the professional market that you might be able to take back into your own growing. And I'm also going to meet up with Mark, who's the nursery manager here at Blue Diamond Nurseries, who's going to take me through the process from the moment he buys the seed till it finally grows into a suitable sized plant to send out to the garden centres. Do you know, Mark, every time I come into a nursery, there's something magical about not only the sight of all the plants, the smell of fresh oxygen as they're all photosynthesizing and growing.
Yeah, it's a very satisfying experience producing these plants. We produce them from, we see them through from when they're a young plant to when they're an adult. And it gives a sense of real satisfaction to see see the finished product that you've produced going out to a customer.
And even as they start to produce, you'll have had that as a young plant and, let's take a look at that. How gorgeous is it? And of course, you also get the point where it's not just green. Sometimes there's whole swathes of flowers at the same time.
It's absolutely beautiful when you see that. That really is a satisfying experience.
And just have a look just behind us here with thousands of plants. If you just think of how many gardens will have something that's come from here that you and your team have personally, must give you a great feeling of well-being.
It certainly does, yes. Yeah. It's up there with it, I think.
So Mark, take me from the moment you get the seed and it arrives in the nursery to the point it becomes a final plant ready to go out.
Right, so the first thing that happens obviously is we get the packet of seed turns up, which, as you can imagine, thousands of seed. We have a machine then to sow these because of the volume that we're putting through, and that machine will then sow the seed directly into the container that we're putting them into, so the plug tray.
So you just fill the seed at the top really, and it separates it out and drops it into each one.
Into the holes. And we take that through. We'll then, from that stage, we then take that to the germ room.
And then when you say germ room, it's not like germs that we have. It's horticultural term for germination. So it's your propagation room, your germination house, yeah.
Yeah, and in there the seed will, germinate.
Yeah.
And from that stage onwards, then we take it out, we put it down on the ground, we grow it on until that plant is big enough for transplanting into its final container.
So you've got them then growing in the propagation house where, to be fair, there's a lot more to it than just the prop house. You've got the right temperature, the right amount of moisture, humidity, the air, all of those details to help them germinate.
Yes, so we get them in the ideal conditions basically to get as even quick germination as we can. Yeah.
So you've got a young plant that's got a good developed young root and a top, and it's ready now for the big pot, really, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And how do you do that?
Right, we take the plants over to our production line, which fills the pots mechanically fills the compost into the pots, and then by hand we'll then transplant the individual plugs into their final containers.
So it's a combination between technology and personal touch to get the best.
Yes. From there they'll go into the greenhouse, which is probably where they'll stay until they go out. But the first stage is they'll get put down in a block until they grow big enough to be spaced out.
And that's all done by hand, your team going through tending and caring and moving each plant?
Moving each plant, yeah.
And they're all graded as well. You're only selecting the very best of the best that ends up in the garden centre.
So when we space them out, we'll actually go through them and put all the nice bushy ones to one side, and then any of the smaller ones we'll keep together to allow them to have more attention to get them to thicken out as well, so they will come on later on.
Good grief. You just think about the propagation you do in your own greenhouse. Just think of the size of your greenhouse, or even the windowsills that you're doing at home. How many acres of bedding plants are you growing under glass here?
6 acres.
6, and how many plants is that?
That's about 1.5 million plants.
1.5 million plants, and you've got to take care of each one as they go through the process. That's a giant responsibility, that. Well, thanks ever so much for showing me around the nursery. It looks amazing.
Thank you.
Well, What a privilege to see behind the scenes at a growing nursery that's producing bedding plants at an incredible high quality, so you get the best experience from the plants when you put them into your own garden. And all you have to do is follow the simple rules to make sure you get great success with your bedding plants. First of all, make sure there's plenty of space. Don't overpack hanging baskets or containers. Leave space for the plants to grow into. Also, light. Many of these bedding plants, because they're producing a lot of flowers, require light to be able to photosynthesize and use and create energy to produce more flower and foliage. The next thing, of course, is as they're using that energy, they're going to need plenty of water. Make sure they're regularly hydrated and fed as well. Liquid fertilizer in helps the plant produce more and more flowers. And finally, when they finish flowering, deadhead. Take the flower heads off. We covered a lot about deadheading in our last episode, so if you missed it, go back to take a look. And that way, by deadheading, the plant redirects energy back into the production of more flowers and more growth, rather than waste time producing seeds. And if you follow those rules, the colour in your garden will look spectacular. Blessed with beautiful flowers, Painted Lady is a runner bean that will give gardeners a lot in a growing season. Let me show you how I approach growing these legumes. My dad grew runner beans, and when I was a kid I remember walking up the steps, because we had a higher section of the garden where my dad did all the grow your own, and I loved walking in between the tall runner beans growing up the canes, seeing the beautiful flowers and then the long beans, and my mum cooking up a lovely beef Sunday dinner with succulent beans on the side, a few Yorkshires and lashings of gravy as well. They're incredibly tasty, and they're so incredibly easy to grow in the garden, and they give height to the vegetable area. They're almost like little sentinels of beautiful twining stems with green leaves and spectacular flowers as well. Let me show you what my dad grew. This is a big favourite. Look at them. That's what you get in a packet. Instantly recognisable. Jack bought some of these in exchange for a cow, and look at the trouble he got into. But they grow a beautiful bean. This is Painted Lady. It's a marvellous plant. It's been grown as a bean in gardens since the early 1800s. It originated, funnily enough, from Central America in the highlands, both in southern Mexico and Guatemala. And over time, unlike the French bean, this particular Painted Lady bean has evolved to be able to grow particularly well in colder climates, which makes it very suitable for our UK gardens. And aren't they lovely? There's something very tactile, and every little bean can grow up to a phenomenal height, full of flower, full of foliage, and of course full of beans as well. You can buy these from the garden centre and grow them in one of two ways. One, you can wait and sow them directly in the soil later on in May, or you can put them in pots inside the greenhouse or on an unheated windowsill to set them off growing early, so when you plant them out in May, they're a little bit of a further way forward. And you can also go to garden centres and buy them pre-grown in containers. If you are sowing seeds at the end of May rather than pre-grown plants, you harvest them slightly later. Obviously, they'll start producing their beans from August through to October, where the pre-grown ones have a little bit of a head start, and you can start cropping from July through to October. Planting bean seeds couldn't be easier. It's a lovely job as well. They like a sunny location, pretty well drained soil. In fact, the secret with everything is in the soil. And if you want some great hints and tips on how you can make the most of the soil in your garden, please watch episode 1 of this series. It's full of information. So I dig a hole here at the foot of one of my uprights. I go about 5 centimetres down, and then I choose 2 bean seeds and just drop them in. You know, I've put 2 seeds in, really, because that's just about enough. 2 plants can work together, twirling right the way up to the top of the cane. So 2 in each one works. If you're planting them in rows, you want about 30 centimetres in between each plant and about 45 centimetres in between each row. I loosen up the soil just with the trowel. It's one of the best tools to use on a lot of intimate planting and borders. Dig it down and I loosen up the soil underneath. So when the seeds, 2 of them here, when the seeds start to germinate, they can get themselves established in the soil pretty quickly. Just over the top, there we go. There and there. And last 2 just here. Now they germinate quite quickly. It depends on how warm everything is. And when you start seeing them just push through the surface of the soil, the little green shoots, it uplifts the heart. And as I mentioned earlier, they'll take a little bit longer before you can harvest them than if you were to plant them from seeds that you have germinated the month before inside an area. Either, oh, there we go, I was doing a bean short there, and 2 just in there. They will start producing beans. You'll be harvesting round about August through to October, where pre-grown ones you can harvest a bit earlier because obviously they've got a head start. Well, it's as simple as that. What I do now is the all-important watering them in. I've got a little rose which makes the water come out in a variety of little jets. The secret is when you're watering, you've got to give everything a really good soaking. So just watch that. I've watered here. And if I was just to show you, if I was just to scrape back, you see it's still a little bit dry underneath. It's only gone down about an inch or so. So water, then let it soak in, and a couple of minutes later, go back to water again to really help it penetrate deep down into the soil. Now, if you're planting pre-grown beans, the one thing to remember is they are quite brittle. So as you come to tease them out of the containers, try to untangle them first so you don't break any of the very sensitive stems. And the first thing to do with anything that you've pre-grown that you're putting into the ground is make sure you give them a good saturation so they're wet in their own little root ball before they go into the soil. Give it a little squeeze at the base of the container if you've pre-bought grown beans, and you get them out like this. Now, as you can see, there's 4 here, so with my fingers I'm gently teasing the roots apart. There we are. And see what I mean by the heads? Because of the shape of the leaf, like an arrowhead, the base of the leaf is easy to get tangled into the next one. Take your time. Take your time and separate them. See what I mean? How brittle they are. Look at that leaf, already gone. So separate them nice and easily with as much of the foliage as possible. And because they've been well watered beforehand, that gives them a little helping start. And just like we did with the bean seeds, loosen up the soil around the base of one of the wigwam uprights. Now, this soil has had a lot of organic matter dug into it. In fact, it was dug in last autumn. Autumn's not a bad time to prepare soil because as the frost expands and contracts it, it helps a lot of the organic material to work its way in. And then, at the level it is, I'm just going to lightly firm in around the base. Now, you can just lightly string the beans to the base to give them a head start, and then they will start to twine around. In fact, you could probably have a lot taller canes themselves for these beans to grow around because they can get up to about 1.8 metres. This particular area we want to keep them low, so I'll stop the tops to try and encourage more beans growing at the base. This one in over here. Now, the thing about these plants is when they flower, they get pollinated in a rather unusual way. The bees themselves have to vibrate the flower to engage pollination, which is why it's really well pollinated by bumblebees, because they're slightly heavier. So when the bee comes in, shake it about a bit, open it up, get covered in pollen, and then go to pollinate other flowers as well. So the bumblebee works, and it's got a really clever name. It's called buzz pollination mechanism. How lovely. Now I've got a friend who grows these beans under cover and doesn't always get the bumblebees in. So to mimic the bumblebee and the vibration of the visit of the bee, he's using an electric toothbrush on the flowers. It's a little bit of biomimicry, and that's how nature's teaching humans. There we are, the lovely runner bean, painted lady, otherwise known as Phaseolus cassinius. It's a beautiful plant, not just for the lovely tasty beans, which you've got to cook up, but there is something about it that you can eat without having to cook, and that's the flowers. You can use them in salsas and also in salads. You get so much bang for your buck with runner beans. This is a lovely variety. My dad was right to grow these, and I'm growing them too, because it's not just about the flavour, it's the fun of watching it grow. It's the beauty of it, these sentinels of both foliage and flower right in the middle of the veg garden. And if you haven't got a veg garden, there's no worry, you can grow them in containers too. If there's a certain vegetable that's worth a grow, it's runner beans, and try these painted lady. Spectacular gardens like Bridgemere have so much to see when you visit. I want to share with you some of my highlights from my latest trip. This is one of my favourite spots at Bridgemere Show Gardens, and every time I come it looks different. And seeing all the different textures of greens, it's incredibly calming, and that with the sound of the water as well makes it one of the most tranquil spots in the whole of the gardens. It's not just about the planting at Bridgemere Show Gardens, it's also about the detail. This is one of the most cosiest gardens going. It's the Women's Institute Cottage Garden that won one of the top awards at Chelsea Flower Show back at the end of the 80s. Perfectly reconstructed here, and look at the paving and all the detail of the brickwork. It looks as if it's been here for centuries, and that type of detail with the beauty of the plants goes a long way into making these show gardens so very special. Growing fruit trees is very rewarding. There's an apple tree for almost any garden. Let me demystify them for you. I was asked recently, what is my favourite tree? Out of all the beautiful trees that I've grown over the years, what is the one, if I could only choose one, that I'd plant in a garden? And without a shadow of a doubt, it's the humble apple. I love the tree. Just put the fruit aside for a moment. It is a very ornamental, shapely tree that you can grow in different sizes. In 40 years in horticulture, I have seen giant ancient orchards with massive trees. And I've also seen small apples grown in containers on people's patios where children go to pick the fruit and examine the beautiful flowers, because it does have beautiful flowers. It's an excellent floral tree, tight in bud, looking great and pink when it's small, opening out into white to create whole clouds of flowers. And of course it's got the spectacular foliage, green during the season and autumn colour too, but you also get the fruits. If you're planting an apple in your garden for the first time and you visit the garden centre, you'll get a lot of different options to size and also shape. Now, the traditional apple, something like this one here, you can buy to plant in the garden. Then there are little dwarf varieties that you can grow in containers, and you can even get some espalier and cordon ones which have been trained to grow flat either against walls or in between plant beds. But before you go anywhere near in selecting the shape and the size, one of the things to know about apples is they need to cross-pollinate with other apples to produce the fruit. Apart from self-fertile varieties that can pollinate themselves, many other tasty varieties need to pollinate with another apple so the fruit is produced. If you've got apples in neighbouring gardens or crab apples nearby, there's every chance you could buy one and hope it pollinates with the others. But it's always best to buy two so one pollinates against another. Now let me just explain why there are different groups that pollinate with others. So for one apple to pollinate with the other, the flowers must be open at the same time. Some cases, apples flower right the way from the end of March, and some flower right at the end of May, so they're not out at the same time. To make it easy, we group apples in flowering time, and they're numbered. Number 1 at the earliest possible moment, and number 7, which is the varieties that flower really late on in the season. And if you chose an apple, say apple that's in group number 2, it'll pollinate with all other apples in group number 2 and the adjacent ones. So it'll pollinate with group number 2, group number 1, group number 3. You get the picture. So when you go to a garden centre to buy the apples, check with the plantaria staff and they'll help you choose the ones with the right group. Apart from self-fertile ones that you can plant on your own. There is another group that are really fussy. Bramley seedling, that's one of them. It will get pollinated but doesn't pollinate others. The really convenient thing about apple trees is you can have the same apple, your favourite apple, in many different sizes, as a small tree or as a big tree. Have a look at this. The height of the tree is regulated by the roots. And earlier on in the episode we were talking about grafted vegetables. Well, guess what? Fruit trees have been doing them for years. As you can see, this one here, this is the rootstock. That's where its original head was, but instead they've grafted on another top. So say, for instance, you like Cox's orange pippin. You could graft a Cox's orange pippin onto a rootstock that keeps it as a small tree. Or you could graft a Cox's orange pippin onto the top of a rootstock that's very vigorous and grows into a big tree. So you could choose your favourite apple at different sizes depending on its rootstock. So at the beginning of the 20th century at East Malling Research Station in Kent, they classified and identified different rootstocks to achieve different sized trees. Each rootstock was given a letter M, followed by a number that relates really to the size and vigour of the tree. M27 is the smallest one. It's very dwarf and it creates trees that are ideal for patios, tubs or confined spaces. M9 is a dwarf tree. It's perfect for a bush apple for a small garden, growing to about 2.5 metres. It's also used to grow cordon and fan train fruit. M26 is slightly bigger. It's good for a family garden, growing to about 3 metres. Then there's MM106. Now that's a very big, it's semi-vigorous bush and it can grow up to 4.5 metres. Perfect if you've got a big lawn that you want a tree in the middle or you're growing for an orchard. I would recommend, if you've got an average sized garden, of buying a bush apple tree, which is on M27 stock here. You can buy them in garden centres, and I would advise you as well to talk to the garden centre member of staff in the plantaria department to give you advice to help you with pollination, and also check your neighbours' gardens to see if they've got apple trees too. But if you haven't got space, doesn't mean you can't have an apple. Containers are pretty good too, and you can buy trees that have been specifically produced to grow as patio fruit trees. So get yourself a container, the biggest container you can, of course. And as I mentioned earlier, apples do like a well-drained soil. So at the bottom of the hole, make sure there's a decent hole. There we are, at the bottom. And just to make sure that hole doesn't get blocked, you can put a few garden stones just over the top, just to help with the drainage. Next, plenty of peat-free compost. Take your apple, here's a tip, lightly touch the sides like that, and the pot comes straight off. There we go. Now you want to plant it in the container the same level it was in the pot originally. And what I do is I plant it down a little bit in the pot, so there's about that gap all the way around the top, so I can fill up with water so it can soak through when it comes round to keeping it well hydrated. There you are. As you can see, it's planted the same level as the pot, and I've got that much gap to fill up with water. As simple as that. A lovely tree to be on your patio, not only producing fresh apples, but also beautiful blossom, lovely healthy green leaves, and autumn colour as well. You get a lot of bang for your buck with an apple. I hope you enjoyed this very special episode from Bridgemere Show Gardens. And remember, gardening activities are always done step by step. Take some time to enjoy your garden. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more great content.